Talking CRM with Jeff and David, getting the best value for the whole organization from your integrated CRM and accounting systems. David Beard, CRM Principal, and Jeff Richards, Head of Training Program Development for Sage CRM, spend time chatting with customers, resellers, and others about Sage CRM in action around the globe. In this, the first of 3 episodes, myself and my colleague Jeff Richards talk to Mark Engelberg. He's the founder and CEO of TimeLinx. TimeLinx works with Sage CRM to deliver total financial visibility across a project. It extends projects and service management within the Sage CRM environment from marketing campaigns through opportunities, quoting, service delivery, customer service, and support to provide the fully rounded project management control for all sorts of industries. First, we talked to Mark about how he ended up in this industry and the story of TimeLinx.
So I got involved in CRM, first of all, because I had a challenge with a bigger part of my business, because CRM is just part of a whole, and that whole is typically an accounting system, which we all have. And so I got involved in it because I needed a way to track what was going on with prospective customer relationships. And it was not a technology business at all in the automotive industry. And so that's when I got involved in CRM. But over time, what happened is I realized how important it was to connect CRM to the accounting part of the business, meaning that the work that we were doing and the people that we talked to turned into services. And so services was the driving revenue of the business. And so now I had a relationship management system, my CRM, and then I had all sorts of tools that I was using to manage services, and that was spreadsheets and a project system, Microsoft project, and then my accounting system, and none of them were connected. And that became the genesis for TimeLinx, was how do I find a way to put something between the CRM system, which was leading up to a sale, if I think of it as prospects, turning into customers, which is the C in CRM, and then ultimately having to bill them for work that we were doing.
And so in the gnarly days of projects, Mark, in theory with Microsoft Project and other tools, you could sort of pass data back and forwards, right? So what was the gap for you, and why did you end up going down the road of building your own?
Well, the gap was the Microsoft Project, as sophisticated as it was, there were not the APIs that there were. There was certainly no concept of server-based tools. These were all desktop applications. And it really was not that easy, especially to try to fit the data in a format that was going to be acceptable to Microsoft Project. There was just really no easy way to do it. And what I discovered easily was that the adaptability of the CRM, the ability to add additional data elements to the CRM system, new tables, customizations, as it might be called, or tailoring, made it ideal for saying, well, I have some additional data that I need to store about my customers that I have no other place to put. And so I said, if I add a table, for example, to store what products they purchased from me, and I can connect that in my CRM, what an ideal place to put it. Because then I could bring up the customer record and I could see exactly what they purchased from me before. And that extended then to services. What services did we deliver to them? And perhaps even beyond that, what did we charge for those services? And what products did we deliver?
So you mentioned earlier this combination of using project tools. So immediately I think of PERT charts and Gantt charts and all that sort of stuff. How did it morph from carrying product and service information into project management?
Well, the project management part really became part of a daily struggle. It was a very instantaneous idea that said, I've got people every day who were sending in spreadsheets every week with their time records on it that we needed to retype to put into the accounting system to send invoices out. That was one set of spreadsheets. The other set of spreadsheets where they were also traveling to customer locations and sending in expense reports for their mileage, which they needed to be reimbursed. And then I also need to bill some of the customers, but not all of the customers perhaps, for those expenses. Then, of course, it became obvious that I had to bill customers different amounts. Some customers I was charging one rate per hour and another customer a different rate per hour. And where was I going to keep track of all of that? And then I had staff that, of course, makes different amounts of money. Some people were making one amount per hour, people were making a different amount per hour. And so there's a cost factor. And so that became part of job costing. How do I get that into my accounting system? And all of that became the genesis for what turned into TimeLinx, which was, how do I put all of this in one place that would give me all that data on the fly and would allow my people to enter their own data rather than me having to enter it after they send in a spreadsheet.
You touched on job costing there, and oftentimes I've heard people say to me, yeah, I've got job costing in my accounting system, so that takes care of all that. Where's the gap for you then, apart from, making it one system, which is obviously beneficial?
The gap is that someone has to type that into the accounting system rather than a system that knows that John makes X pounds per hour or X dollars per hour or X dirhams per hour, that's our cost for his work. That no longer needs to be typed in. If John records an hour of work in the system, it knows immediately what the cost was. There's your job cost. Why make someone else type that in and figure it out when John could just type in his hours and that can translate electronically to a cost? And the same thing held true for the revenue side. If John types in an hour and I know that I'm billing the customer X amount per hour, whatever the unit is, have someone have to retype that. And the retyping has two impacts. One is there are mistakes that are made. There is a time gap receiving the information from John out in the field a week later, perhaps at the end of the week, and then having to type that in. And then there is the other problem with an ERP system, and using that as the front end for all of this is what's commonly called a pro forma invoice. Pro forma invoice means we have to print out something that the project manager has to review and make sure that John put his time into the correct task or the correct project, that he didn't choose it by mistake on the spreadsheet, or he used the wrong cost code or some other mechanical error that people make. Mm-hmm. And so that's another time lag there, which is running a pro forma invoice, sending that to John or to John's manager. John's manager reviews it for 6 people and then sends it back all marked up with pencil, saying this is a mistake, change this, wrong rate, wrong cost, whatever it might be, sending it back. That gets retyped again into the accounting system and corrected, sent back again to the manager to review it once more, make sure it's correct, and then send it back and say this is fine. Or maybe it's not and it needs another correction. By the time you do all of that, you've got a delay of 2 weeks or more to send an invoice out, and that's a cash flow problem.
So I was going to ask you, I've got one more and then I'll let Jeff, because I know he's got a burning couple of questions about the technology side of it perhaps. One of the things I love finding out about, Mark, is can you give us an example or two of customers that have just transformed the way they do that sort of activity? Because we're looking for return on investment, right? That's why people buy software.
My favorite story is now 10 years old, and this customer is still with us. They have offices and operations in 14 countries, running about 350 people on TimeLinx for now almost 10 years. They started with 70. When they first brought us in and they were evaluating TimeLinx, they had a couple of objectives. One was the flexibility of the way we can price and cost work, the job cost part. And also, as you can imagine, in 14 countries, and at the time it wasn't 14 countries, it was about 6. They had a problem which was multi-currency, because they were billing customers in different currencies. Now they had a currency conversion factor as well. They had a job cost factor, and they charged different customers different rates for different kinds of work and different projects. And it was really a gargantuan task to turn an invoice out. So what actually was the case, and this was a command from the CEO, was we need to shorten the cycle of getting an invoice out the door. That was the primary objective. And they looked at TimeLinx because of the flexibility, and the fact that it was based on CRM was a key factor, because without the CRM, they had a disconnect between the relationship management and the discussions that salespeople would have and what they were promised during the opportunity cycle of the sale. They were promised one thing, and service people did not know what was promised, and there was no way to line those up that what was committed to was delivered. And you have a somewhat of a contractual obligation when the customer signs a quote and says, here's what we're going to accept, and you're promising to deliver something. If your service teams don't know what that was, you have a real chance for a mistake. And that, in fact, statistically, is where most projects go off the rails, is right at the beginning when sales transfers to service. CRM is the perfect choice for this because it not only solves all of that, but it now provides the connection between sales and service, It solves our multi-currency and our revenue problems and our job cost problems. But at the same time, it speeds up the invoicing because we now have direct entry of the work, which can be electronically computed to the proper revenue and the proper cost without retyping it.
It's a great story. And I imagine that that company, that size, if you took it away from them tomorrow, they'd be a very unhappy company, wouldn't they?
Well, they have determined, and they've said it to me a number of times, they've looked at alternatives to what we have, and they have said, quite frankly, that there is nothing else that they have found that can do what we do. Just one other factor in this, what they found when they brought us in to do a pilot, and they fed into our system records from 2 years prior to see whether, in fact, what we were producing was the same as what they had actually billed their customers. And they found that they had underbilled a large segment of their customers. This is now a $4 billion company. They were underbilling by over 20% for 2 years prior. And that was all because there were errors in the spreadsheets and the formulas that were used. And it was taking them 7 weeks to get an invoice out the door. 7 weeks. The end result of our proof of concept was they fired the CFO a week later because they found that TimeLinx had the right numbers and their spreadsheets were wrong.
And they were happy to write some more checks to you then, right?
And they have been ever since. And the bottom line of the story as well is that it took them at the time, they had 4 people in their finance department who did nothing but enter time records and expense records. Again, these are people flying around the world and having all sorts of costs and things in different currencies. They had 4 people full-time who did nothing but retype everything and calculate before it even got entered into the accounting system. It took them 7 weeks, and this was the command from the CEO, it took them 7 weeks to get the invoices out the door. Today, even though they are 4 times the size that they were then, it takes them 5 days to get invoices out. 5 days, because TimeLinx does all of the work before that.
In the next episode, Jeff Richard delves deeper into the technology to understand how CRM and TimeLinx work together to deliver that end-to-end management. You've been listening to Talking CRM with Jeff and David, getting the best for the whole organization from your integrated CRM and accounting systems.